Hey, what is up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Political Pegasus here, bringing it back to you guys in Remnant from the Ashes, and today we'll be taking an all-new look at my soul of the Sentinel build. Alright, so jumping over into my character sheet here, for my sidearm, I am using the submachine gun tied onto with the weapon mod known as Flicker Cloak. Then from there, I'm using the primary rifle known as the Assault Rifle. Attached onto it is the weapon mod known as Iron Sentinel. From there, as my melee weapon, I'm using Butcher's Flail with the power of Corrosive Strike. Then I'm using Sentinel sets for the helmet, chest, and boots. Then for my necklace, I'm using Twisted Idol. For my first ring, I'm using Soul Link. And for my second ring, I'm using Spirit Stone. So let's jump over into traits. Alright, so the traits are going to be as follows. The three primary traits I would highly recommend for this build are going to be Vigor, Endurance, and Quick Hands. So the reason I see these three as being the primary traits to utilize within the course of this build is because they're super well rounded. They're the base level traits that you would utilize to make a really nice base balanced build. So I think that these traits will be best suited for you at the beginning of the build. Now keep in mind, like I always say in all my videos, I do highly recommend going for every trait within the course of the game. Make your character more unique, more versatile, and just more well rounded to be able to deal with any set situation. Now, with all that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into some gameplay. Alright, so we are on ROM here playing on Apocalypse mode. Today we're going to go over the pros and cons of this awesome build, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So one of the cool aspects of this build is the fact that you have a lot of self-sustain, and reason being for this is because your turrets that happen to go about doing X amount of damage will actually go about self-sustaining you when tied into the ring known as Soul Link. From there, you can consistently go about mowing down enemies and still heal yourself without worrying about taking too much damage. So it is really nice at the end of the day to have that consistent form of healing, especially in Apocalypse mode, because that's something that you really end up being lackluster in when it comes to playing on higher level difficulties. So having that slight self-healing is a really nice added bonus. From there, another core aspect I really do enjoy with the turrets is the fact that you can actually stop people from actually pathing into you. So basically what that means is if you're on a staircase and you end up putting it behind you, what happens is that no one can actually walk up the staircase because of the fact that the sentinels are blocking the actual way. So in that regard, it makes it really self-sufficient to be able to use the sentinels in correct positioning to be able to not only have your back, but to be able to self-sustain you as well, and on top of that, to be able to clear out a lot of ads within a short given amount of time. Because the turrets happen to stay up for quite some time, so as long as you have correct positioning with these set turrets, you're blocking enemies' pathways, you're being able to self-sustain yourself, and you're also clearing out ads, and continuously DPSing boss while the turret does its thing. So at the end of the day, it's super well rounded, and you will be relying on the turrets a lot for this core concept of the build, but it does synergize really well with the base value armor set, which is another base pro with this particular build, because the armor set is actually a heavier base armor set, but because of the necklace that we end up wearing, it does lower the circumference. So what that means is that you can actually dodge roll a little bit and still be somewhat mobile without really feeling the whole heavy weight of this massive armor set. So in that regard, you can actually capitalize on being able to dodge roll, reposition yourself while still taking a lot of damage and still surviving pretty easily, while the turrets end up doing its thing and you end up self-sustaining yourself and just being able to pop consumables or dragon hearts or just mow down enemies in the process. So it is a really nice synergized base build. Of course, there are some cons to this build in itself. You are still a lot slower than some of the other builds, so keep that in mind. And another thing is that you are acceptable to, of course, status effects, so from there also keep that in mind as well. But at the end of the day, this is probably one of the most tanky builds you will come across in Remnant from the Ashes, just due to the fact of how much armor value this set ends up giving you and how much potential you really have to offer with this set armor set. As long as you're popping your consumables, you're using your sentinel turrets, and you're positioning accordingly, honestly, you're practically a god. You're never really going to die unless you end up being a complete idiot and end up putting yourself up against 30 base enemies throughout the course of the map. But I digress. Now, another cool pro with this particular build is that the submachine gun that you're utilizing is really good at clearing up ads or just bursting close base targets that happen to be next to you, so you can be able to reposition yourself to be able to burst that low level base target, or just being able to backpedal a little bit and get some healing done while the sentinels end up doing work. Another cool aspect too is that the rifle is really good for mid and long range. So between the submachine gun being really good for close and mid range and the rifle being good for mid to long range, you have a very nice stance that you can hold and bunker down with your turrets and not worry about enemies too close, too far, or just really irritating you, because you can literally hit them from every range and do quite a bit of damage to them without really worrying about it too much. Another cool aspect too is because you are using the assault rifle, it is super accurate. So in order to land critical hits and to just subsequently keep that damage consistent, you really have a nice weapon to go about doing that, and it's super well rounded at the end of the day. So in reality, you don't really have to worry about any of your damage falling off at all, or anyone being resistant to the weapon you're using, because it's just straight bullets. You don't have to worry about them having any form of resistance bases or any really high armor base value, because when 3 different turrets are literally hitting you at once, yourself included, literally is really hard to build a high armor output around that. So at the end of the day, you're really working out the build in regards to a really nice synergy balanced base setup. So it works out in your favor. There is a little bit of a jump cut in the course of the video because I did get lost, so I'm just going to transition, but it is still the same dungeon. Now, moving forward with one of the other benefits to this build is that the submachine gun, with the mod you happen to be utilizing, literally you can make yourself a living weapon. Basically what that means is you throw down both of your sentinels, the sentinels go about doing damage and healing you, but then from there, when you activate the mod in the submachine gun, you literally take no damage for like the next 5 seconds. With that being said, you can easily move in with your melee based weapon and be able to utilize your melee weapon to apply the debuff stack, which will then decrease the armor output value of your set enemy to make it even more vulnerable to your turret's damage output, which again will continuously heal you as that set damage goes about progressing. So at the end of the day, like I said, super well rounded, super balanced. You're really not going to see anything to be really wrong with the base build. It's just really overall balanced base build. Of course, it's not going to be the most amazing damage in the world. It's not going to be like the fastest base build, but at the end of the day, it will be able to single-handedly get you through apocalypse mode, probably without a single death, if you end up mastering this build. And if you don't believe me, give the build a shot yourself, because trust me when I tell you, you can easily run this build and not die once in apocalypse mode. Now, moving forward over into the boss fight here. Now, normally these guys are a complete pain in the ass, just due to the fact there's 2 of them, there's radiation, there's ads, there's a lot going on, but you're really going to see the overall potential that this build happens to offer when it comes to this tankiness and base survivability, as well as really good self-sustainable damage output, just by the fact alone that I'm able to tank so much of the pretty much BS that they end up throwing at me here. As you can see, I do end up having to proc a Dragon Heart and consumables and keep those on rotations, but granted, at the end of the day, if I was positioning accordingly and backpedaling a little bit more, not letting him get so close to me and soaking up the damage he ends up doing, I probably wouldn't have had to use the Dragon Heart there, but at the end of the day, I digress. As I move in here, I end up popping consumables first before I end up doing so that way I don't end up worrying about getting flanked by the ads, and I don't have to worry about the radiation stacking on me to be able to slowly dwindle my health. So with that being said, I hide behind the pillar and I just wait cautiously as I go about clearing out every ad and restocking my consumables and waiting on my mods output to regenerate. That's also a nice core aspect of this build too, is that you have a lot of mod power generation. It may not seem that way from the armor set you happen to be using, as well as the weapon types, but the mod generation power output is actually really effective. You can see here I continuously go about proccing my turrets, and I can literally self-sustain myself pretty easily while doing so. Another core aspect is too, as I notice that the turrets are literally laying waste into them, I switch over to melee mode in a hot second, which allows me to just reduce their armor value by a lot. So from there, my turrets just do even more damage, and then I just let them wreck them right afterwards. So I spawned 2 turrets right on top of them after my other 2 turrets had just faded, and I let them go about doing the work while self-sustaining me, and then that's the melee guy already cleaned up about like 2 minutes into the fight. From there, I end up swapping over to some of the other consumables that I have in my bag, and then I go to town with my turrets in the same base rotation. In order to proc those consumables, you might have missed it there, but I used the weapon mod off my submachine gun to be able to self-sustain myself while I drank a bunch of consumables. Now, some of you might argue that this isn't the best course of action I could have done with the actual mod itself. I probably should have gone more on the offensive, but to be honest, just making sure that I'm more future-proof for the longevity of the fight with this build makes it a lot more worthwhile, because of the fact that this build, like I said, it's not going to be the highest damage output, but it is really good self-sustained damage. So I don't really have to worry about the damage output falling off, but I do have to keep in mind that I want to keep all my consumables out so that way I can consistently keep my damage output up, not worry about getting flamed, and just keep consistently dealing that said damage without really worrying about any BS that might come my way during this selected boss fight, because we've all been there where we got the boss on the ropes and then all of a sudden this happens. So in that regard, I want to make sure that I'm going to be good to go, and I'm just going to keep rotating out consumables so instead of getting that little extra damage output. So sometimes your offense is really the best defense in this regard, and I can't stress that enough of how much that actually has so much value with this particular build. So as you see here, as I progressively go about pushing on the offensive here after drinking all my consumables and rotating out my set turrets, I just keep pushing in continuously, not worrying about anything that happens to be going on, and just continuously keep mowing down my enemies that happen to keep spawning. After a while, I then realized I can probably keep the ads alive and just use them as forms of like healing sponges, because I can just use my Sentinel to just literally kill them, and then I just focus down the boss. So I don't really give a crap about the ads after a while. I just start focusing down the boss, and the turrets end up doing the rest. And as long as I stay kited behind my turrets, they can block these projectile shots pretty easily. So I don't really have any issues. And right then and there, it's a teabag and a win. Can't really complain. But yeah, that's going to be it, guys. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave it right down below. So don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Hope you guys real soon.